Hello, my name's James Piecowye. Welcome to Podaholics and another episode of We Will Fix It with Colin Thomas from WeWillFidIt Dubai and Essential Maintenance Dubai for the next, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to talk about DIY at home and all of the ins and outs of making that work. It's always great to be able to sit down with Colin, and we're doing it again via Zoom. Colin, welcome to the program. Great to have you back.
It is lovely to be back, James. Couldn't be here last week. It was all just a bit too hectic. Everybody is dealing with the constant changes that not just the coronavirus, but the lockdown is causing. So it's busy.
So I mean, you guys are in the maintenance business globally. This is got to be one of those times, maintenance and repair and upkeep of facilities. Globally, this has got to be a really challenging time as organizations and groups like yourself figure out how, A, to keep things rolling because stuff breaks down, but B, how to constantly, as I constantly use this term from Jamie Oliver, how to duck and dive with regulations and with the thinking that evolves on an hourly basis. So how are you guys doing?
Daily COVID-19 meetings. So when we come in every morning, that's the first thing that we do is sit down, work out what changed overnight, and react to it there and then. Quite a lot of proactive as well. So an understanding of where we think the regulations are going to go and where that leaves us. Keeping our guys up to speed is critical. They're as worried as everybody else, and trying to communicate with them that A, we are doing everything possible to keep them safe and us still working has been really critical. So it's been, if you could take out the human side of the coronavirus and the horrific things that it's caused to so many nations around the world, as a purely business challenge, it's been quite something and quite exciting in many ways to deal with. There is no constant, nothing is a constant, and we're now just expecting the unexpected, and that has to be how people react right now.
So I want to go back to the guys who literally are on the front lines. You typically have teams of 2 or 3 that go out and they deal with everything from
strictly 2.
Oh, so now you're at 2.
Vans. For this space, our vans, as you know, sit 3. Under no circumstances does that middle seat get used. Okay. We now have supply. I mean, just the basics of we needed to secure supplies of our medical masks. As people know, in Dubai for the last 2 weeks, that has been a really difficult scenario. And for us, I need to have a runway as long as possible so that I know my guys are protected and for as long as possible. So we had an initial supply of 2,000 that we were able to get our hands on. We then moved that to 4,000. Today, we're buying another 2,000. So we have literally 6,000 masks available for our guys, which even then only takes us through till June. So the practicalities of when you are responsible for, in our case, close to 100 staff is something that weighs very heavily on our shoulders. So we've put everybody through separate COVID training. All of our guys have the gloves and masks that are mandated. All of our offices and vehicles are getting sprayed, the offices on a daily basis, the vehicles every other day. We just implemented a couple of days ago that any location within a customer's house that we're in, we will fully sanitize afterwards free of charge to give people at home that peace of mind that, if you have us in our house, we're doing everything possible to keep it safe.
That's a really interesting scenario that you're literally going to go into someone's house, you're going to work on their AC, you're going to help them with a water leak, you're going to replace a water pump, and you're offering for free of charge to sanitize their environment?
Yeah, in the areas where we're working. It's a simple story. If you imagine the basic issues that you have, and this is any business operating within this environment, the first thing is, you're absolutely right, so regulations. What are we actually allowed to do within the regulations? Separately from that, you then have the access issues for each of the developments, and they're all different as it sits. And they don't necessarily completely tie in with the requirements. Some of them are more draconian than the rules and regulations here in Dubai. So that basically only gets you to the front door. The main issue over the last week has been people understandably been really scared about having anybody in their home, emergency or not. So, and then also there's a bunch of companies that have turned up saying, oh, we will come and sanitize your home. And what most of these companies aren't aware of is, if you want to charge for that as a service, there are significant regulations and courses that you have to do with Dubai municipality here. You can't just offer it as a service, which is just ridiculous. So what we've done is the opposite approach, which is, okay, practically speaking, what is it that people are worried about within the home environment, and what can we do to help with that? And for us, it was simple, which is, okay, if we sanitize, so we are recommending for people, if they are worried about it, to isolate themselves in an area of the house where we will not be. Not only do we obviously have the social distancing scenario, but we're going one step beyond that. So therefore, we will, over the phone, take even more detail than we normally do. So our guys are briefed, ready for arrival, so they understand exactly what is going on. We will then isolate our guys as much as possible within the home, so that way there isn't any risk of infection there. And then secondly, we now have 30 fogging machines which are going to physically fog the spaces that we've been in before we leave. And it is literally just a sweep as they walk out of the house, all tools have left, they then go back, they start at the point where they started, they go all the way to the front door.
So tell me about these fogging machines, Colin, and what do they do, and how does that work to sanitize the environment?
Yeah, so basically what we decided to go down, the route we went down was, we wanted to stick with fogging agents that we're comfortable with and that have been tested. We've used Dettol since 2008. A lot of the specialist fogging agents, antibacterial, etc., are from very specialist small companies that haven't actually done the level of testing. They're making an assumption that they're going to work with the COVID group of viruses as a whole. What I like about Dettol is because obviously they are, it's a brand of an enormous company with a big long history, is they've done all the testing on the previous COVID viruses. As you're probably aware, they're all from one big family, which includes SARS and the various other better known viruses that are out there. As it sits right now, there isn't a company that we found that has done COVID-19 testing, for the simple reason that COVID-19 has not been made available as a sample to commercial companies to be able to operate. What we do know from the academic testing that has been done is it reacts in a very similar way to the rest of the COVID viruses, COVID-19 that is. Dettol's perspective on it is they have put out a press release saying we know that these particular Dettol products work at these concentrations with all the other COVID, so there's no reason at all why it shouldn't work with COVID-19, even though we, like everybody else, have not been able to test it. So that's what we've stuck with. We've stuck with the medical concentration of Dettol liquid, and interestingly enough, you can't get a fogger in the UAE for love nor money, and we've got 8 anyway that are used, generally speaking, for as part of our standard AC duct cleaning process as the last stage. But we wanted every team to be able to do it. So what we actually did was we were using a product that's actually designed as an electric car sprayer. So it's there to spray car paint, but it's also designed to work with stains, which are liquid-based, and it works better the thinner the substance. So therefore, with us using basically a water-based Dettol mix, it works better than it was designed to work spraying cars. And also we're able to get stock. So every single team now has this equipment with them. And yeah, it's working extremely well so far.
What kind of feedback are you getting from your customers? They must be reassured with this added level of...
Yeah. It's, I think we all understand that there is a risk, and there's a risk that can be mitigated to a certain degree. For us as we will fix it in essential maintenance, our aim is to mitigate it as much as we possibly can. There's news overnight, I don't know whether you've heard it, but the Prime Minister in the UK has just been put in intensive care. This is not a virus that is just down to people who are not social distancing. It is kind of aggressive in the way that it can be, that people can contract it. So our aim is to mitigate just as much as we possibly can. And really, when I knew that this was open and a possibility to us, we literally had it. The sample unit was with us inside 2.5 hours of realizing this process could work. We had it tested over the next 2 or 3 hours to prove that it would work, at which time the order was in and we had them purchased and ready to go and operational the next morning. So it literally was within 24 hours of the concept that it was actually implemented and out. And if anything else comes up, we're literally watching the whole time, and if there is anything else that we can do to protect our staff and our customers, then of course, in this environment, it's exactly what we would do.
On another more human note, how are your staff doing? How are the guys, the 2-man teams that are heading out into different houses, into different businesses? How are they faring mentally with this? Into the abyss, into the unknown. You just don't know what you're going to be confronting, not with the repairs they're doing, but with the unknown of how they're going to deal with potential exposure to this virus.
Yeah. There's obviously that worry there. What we're trying to do is to keep them up to speed. So we have a daily WhatsApp group, we have a weekly meeting, and the focus on that is an update of world events, so that if they've missed something, then we can provide that information for them. And an understanding of what best practice looks like, and constant reminders. You will hear these shouts frequently in our offices of 2 meters, social distancing, without a doubt. When processes in place, every van is tagged. Before we're allowed in the morning, every single stop, before you are allowed in this building, temperature checks are done and reported, so that we have all of that information for us there. And we've been doing that for weeks and weeks now. So it's about getting processes in place to make sure that nothing breaks down under pressure. And secondly, the fact that they're seeing how rigid we are being as a company in the implementation of that, I think gives them quite a lot of confidence that we are being safe during their work hours. What's critical for us as well is that they understand that this isn't something during work hours, this is something at home that they need to implement as well. So, for instance, today we just doubled the quantity of masks that they're being given, so that they have multiple masks per day. And now that we've been able to secure the extra stock, which was a big battle for this morning. And we're trying to hammer home to them that social distancing and these masks are something they should be doing for the entirety of this period.
I find it interesting when we talk social distancing, and I follow people like Emma Brain and others who are posting pictures from their balconies of where they're living here in Dubai with people who just aren't doing it. They're out jogging, they're out running, they're just out socializing. And I've seen pictures from around the world the same, that some folks just don't get the concept of having that space so that potentially we're not passing this virus from one person to the other to really help mitigate the spread. And it's the craziest thing, isn't it?
It is crazy, but then, the one thing that's in my mind is there is nowhere else in the world that I would rather be right now than in the UAE. What the government here has done to manage the spread of the virus is quite frankly exceptional. If you look at the statistics, they've done testing on 212,000 people in the UAE. That figure is actually about 3-4 days old now. But they've arranged for that to happen. And you look at any comparable country, apart from Iceland, interestingly enough, and they're at less than a quarter of that. And when, what I've read has basically said, if you test and test on a mass scale, it is going to help you flatten that curve.
Yeah.
And I'm just confused now, because the communication there's been a lot of communication, and it has been at varying levels. It has been really clear at all circumstances what is allowed and what is not allowed. And when there has been an ambiguity, inside 6 hours of that press release going out from WAM or the Dubai Health Authority, et cetera, and the various disaster committees that we have, it's been clarified and it's been spread, and we've known very, very clearly. So what is totally clear is you are not allowed to go out of your home apart from for an essential shop, in which case you must be wearing a mask and gloves as an absolute minimum. You are not allowed to jog here in the UAE. You are not allowed to walk your dog. You're not allowed to socially group. And yet, 100 yards from my home this morning, as I'm going into the office, because we do need to be here, I've got 3 Western people who clearly have been having a jog, have stood on the corner of a roundabout, having pulled their masks down to have a discussion. And you're just like, what level of ridiculousness is that? So yeah, it's around the world, and here I think it's better than most, but people still aren't getting it.
I'm really impressed with the permit system that we need to get when we go out. Now, not only does that permit system apply to vehicles, it also applies to if you need to walk, because there are highly condensed areas of population here in the UAE, much like around the world, take New York or London, etc. And you need to get a permit. What I found really interesting with the permits, especially as it applies to cars, is all of the cameras that are synced around the city, from petrol stations, radar detectors, going into malls, etc. And someone said to me, well, you could put in where you're going to go and you could game it and go somewhere else. And I said, no, you can't, because they cross-reference it. Once you put in your license plate and you put in the times, the computer systems that they have in place here, again, to enforce this for our own benefit, keep track of this. And if you're that person who's going to game it, they're going to catch you and ask, hold on a second, you said you were going to Spinny's and you ended up over in Jumeirah Beach. What gives? This is not allowed, and they're going to catch you right off. So I'm as you said, really, really impressed with what the government here is doing and the extraordinary steps they're taking to flatten and literally erase this curve, because that is the only way you can do it. You have to stop the spread. And how do you stop the spread? You stop it by people literally being too close to each other.
Yeah. You talk about, you spoke about our staff and that side of things. And you know what, we understand that right now as a business, we are better off than most. We are a little bit down, but I've got friends who are in the events industry that are just wiped out. And I've got my, relations here who no longer have a job. And it's just devastating. It's necessary. But it's devastating for people, and we all need to be very mindful of that.
Yeah. Do you know? I wanted to jump forward a little bit, and when we start talking, and you open the door to things with business are continuing. In a sense, you guys are an essential service. You need to keep our infrastructure in our environments, and those are our apartments, our villas, etc. You need to keep that infrastructure functioning. Are you finding, and maybe this is just my own perception, maybe it's an incorrect perception, but because we're spending more times in our domicile where we live, that we're putting more strain and stress on it, and more things are breaking because we're using more of the washrooms more often. We're using our air conditioning now more often, and these little things that might have just been on the brink of needing some maintenance, needing some repairs, now are being taxed and they're breaking. Are you finding that, or yeah?
Well, there's kind of two, absolutely. I mean, it's not even a question. That is absolutely the case. You've got that, the basic emergency, which luckily, like you say, we've been classed as a vital sector as we work with both district cooling, which is one of the points that was made. We're working with water, we're working with electricity. We are a support logistics company in many respects, as well as the support sector of maintenance actually named us as we went. So that's been really kind of key. In terms of customers, yes, if you imagine there are lots of people who are normally out of work, kids are at school, so the ACs are not on. There's those people that got an early service in, 4-6 weeks ago, who are sitting very comfortable and very pretty right now. And there are quite a large percentage of people that didn't. So two things there. You're absolutely right. Purely from a mechanical perspective, things are breaking down more, without a doubt. That's really clear when we look at the amount of emergency work that we're doing. But also there's that the quality of air that is within the environment, because everybody is stuck indoors on the whole. So as a result, people are breathing that air so much more, and it's just not as great as it would be from a unit that was recently cleaned. So yeah, we're getting a lot of inquiries coming in from that perspective.
I think Colin, we want to jump right into our feature part of our typical podcast, because we got a lot to do, and that is 10 Minutes with Colin. Everyone loves that feature of the show, and I suspect our 10 Minutes with Colin could go probably a little bit longer than 10 minutes today. But let's jump into it, because it's DIY in lockdown, and you are in the enviable position of working in the DIY industry, also you're going to be considering a move yourself, which requires some DIY, both where you are and where you're going to. And now more and more people are sitting down and they're thinking, hey, you know what? I need something else to create some diversion in my life. I want to get into some DIY. So this means they need you, Colin. Let's jump right into it.
Okay, so if you imagine the limitations of what we've got right now. So normally when you're doing a DIY project, it's a trip to the store to get what you need. Right now, that's not really possible, is it? Because we're on lockdown, and it wouldn't be classed as an essential trip. So that's not going to happen. So kind of the start point has to be, what do you have around you, and what projects do you have that are either going to be possible via the tools and materials that you've got at home, or alternatively don't require any. So my start point actually was those that don't really require any tools. So as a home project, now is the perfect time, both from a mental health perspective and also sanitation perspective, to move your rooms around.
Oh,
so
that's
a start point. Let's think about that rearrangement. So first of all, a living room. If you're going to move a living room around, how long ago was it that you last cleaned under those sofas? Maybe now would be a really good time to actually sanitize it. So most people have Dettol or a similar antibacterial lotion or liquid rather in their homes. Why not now move everything, give it a really, really deep clean, and then think about a new layout? Because if you're stuck at home and everything is the same, you need something for a bit of mental stimulation. And you'd be amazed how used to your current layout you've become. Interestingly enough, we as a family have moved rooms. We didn't kind of realize that we've become kind of pigeonholed in almost the kind of breakfast room area that's like associated right alongside the kitchen. And we weren't really using the lounge. It's ridiculous. We've got this lounge now with a big TV, and instead we all cram into the breakfast room, sitting on the one little sofa with the one little TV, just because it's kind of what we've always done. So instead, we've tried to move ourselves down into the other room, and as it is in our house, we are constant cleaners, to say the least, and obviously my ACs are kept remarkably clean. So we don't have to worry too much about that. But that has been our kind of first step along the way.
I got to say, Colin, I want to jump in for just a second. We've been moving things around in our own house because we've started doing online yoga with Urban Yoga. And amazing, exactly as you said, in order for us to do this, we've had to reconfigure our lounge in a sense so that the sofas are moved around and we can set up our yoga mats. I moved the sofa, one of the sofas, and we're good cleaners. We keep our place clean, but clearly not as clean as I thought, because the first time I moved that sofa, I'm going, what is this under here? And it wasn't so much dust bunnies, but we have pets, and pets have had accidents, and this accident was clearly from a long time ago. And I'm just thinking, wow, we have to be more vigilant in our cleaning in general. So as you said, moving the room gives you that opportunity to deep clean and to rethink your environment a little bit and make it a little bit more practical.
The other thing you can do is take it that step further. If you've got a Dettol liquid or equivalent, an antibacterial liquid there, if you've got just a standard hand sprayer, you can actually create the same scenario as we were talking about before with the sanitization that we're doing, which obviously is much quicker with a machine, but you can do it just with a hand sprayer as well. And maybe doing one room at a time so you can isolate yourselves in the other room whilst it all settles down. It might be a really good time to do that too.
Nice. So tip number 1 for DIY is reorganize your rooms and maybe take it to the extreme and rethink the rooms that you spend all your time in and just make your environment more practical for what we're facing and what we're in the midst of. I like that idea.
Absolutely. The second point for DIY jobs to do on lockdown is we all have a list of jobs that we intended to do, already been to the shop to be able to get the materials that you needed, and are still sat in the Ace Hardware or Speedex bag, not having been done.
Yes.
When is there a better time than now to actually get that done?
You're right.
It's absolutely utterly perfect. Now, I have got a little puppy who, bless him, is utterly legendary. We love Rolo to pieces. But he has chewed the corners off about, 4 of the open shelves in our kitchen area. So hopefully tomorrow, when I won't be in the office, I'm going to start the process of sanding that back and restaining it. Luckily, I've got all the materials I need at home to be able to do that. But also, as I will be moving out at the end of July, it's a basic job that if I don't do, my landlord's going to charge me for. So it seems like a really sensible idea to get all that kind of stuff arranged. And what I'm actually going to do is, first of all, I'm going to make basically an audit of the property with a list of everything that we need to do to get it back to a standard that is suitable for handover back to a landlord. Important to say that here in Dubai, the rules now are that we don't have to repaint the property, although we had that already arranged with our landlord previously. But there are lots of little jobs that actually I just don't think it's fair to leave the landlord with. So actually I had a leaking water. Oh, here's a case in point. I had a leaking water heater that was for a water heater that we don't normally use. In fact, we don't ever use. Which was just a very small drip that really had no implication whatsoever. So as it is, I've isolated that area of the house so that my own WeWillFidIt, or one of my WeWillFidIt teams, came in this morning. They were able to enter from the garage, go straight into the laundry area and change that water heater without ever having to come into contact with Natalie or the family in any shape or form. And they're isolated now in the lounge, which is the other side of the property. One other thing I forgot to mention from a business perspective, we've also just implemented contactless payment as every single team.
So how does that working? So what does that entail?
So it's the the normal handheld Visa machines. Well, we had 10 of them, which was a quantity that MXMBD thought was almost unheard of. It seems like most companies kind of rotate them around. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, take that 10, we'll add another 30, please, so that every single team now has one of these contactless machines. And the current ones are brilliant because either you can tap a credit card on them, so again, no contact required over money, so physical money. They also do Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, all of the main payment methods you can use with the new generation of contactless payment machines. And it basically, again, it's all about just trying to minimize all those contact points that could cause an issue. So, so we have that in place as well. But again, that would have been kind of sat there for ages and, with the water heater, and I just hadn't thought about it. And in truth, with the water heater, if you're pretty DIY savvy, you know what you're doing, it is possible to do that yourself. I wouldn't recommend it because it really is a two-man job. But again, that's something that people can do. But that was on my list for ages that I've got to get this sorted.
What a great tip that you've got. And as you point out, and I'm going to reduce it down even to a more basic concept, is doing your home audit. And if you're like me, I've lived in my place for, 20 years, and there are all sorts of little things that I've just grown. I can live with that. I can think of one right off the bat. In my lounge, I've got a baseboard tiles, so tiles that go around the lounge that form the baseboard, and one of those tiles has come off, and I just balanced it back up, and it's I don't look at it, I don't see it, it doesn't bug me. The day I move, we'll get it all repaired. Or since I've been here for 20 years, I'm thinking my landlord's going to gut where I live anyway, so who knows. But in the process of going room to room, I'm finding, little things, little socket plugs that need an extra screw that I've just lived with because I don't use it, the baseboard things. When the windows, the tracks from my windows, some of them have sand in them, but I don't ever open those windows. But now that I'm using, for instance, one of my kids' rooms as my home office for my classes, I'm opening up the window and I'm noticing, hey, I need to do something with this track. So doing that entire home audit so that you've got, again, those little projects that, take the window track. What's it take? I just need to get my little brush. I need to get my vacuum, sweep it out, maybe put a little bit of silicone spray in there so that it moves nice, and away we go. I've got a better working window in my home. But again, just doing that audit.
I agree with you, but the aspect people don't think about so much, which is really important, is your mental health when you're home in isolation.
Yeah.
And you know what? Having that list of jobs and working through that list of jobs is really good for your mental health. It gives you something to do and a job to do when, there's lots of people out there right now that really are struggling with that whole isolation thing.
And I got to admit, I put a little thing up on Instagram this morning, on LinkedIn this morning, just talking about literally kind of doing breathing exercises is what it's all about, centering yourself. But the tail part of that sort of tip for how to keep yourself sane was make a list. And again, like doing a home audit, go make the list. Every time you finish something, check it off, celebrate it. Yeah. I think make that list really visible so that you can say, okay, well, what are the 2 things I'm going to do today? What are the things I'm going to get cleared off by the end of the week? And as you said, we're at home. These are things that you might have been putting off for a long time. And the fact that I actually did one of them, that I didn't get someone in to do it, I feel really good about that. Now, could I have done it before? Yes, I put it off. I'm lazy. I procrastinated. Celebrate these things. And as you said, mental health is a big piece. Why, again, doing these little things gives you a purpose, gives you something that you have control over. Because I think from our mental health point, that becomes the biggest piece, is that we're in a situation where we don't know where the end is. And forget about when the end comes. We don't know. And that's the end of our lockdown. That's the end of maybe social distancing and things. I don't think it's ever going to end, quite frankly. I think we're going to see the new way is there's always going to be some form of social distancing in place. But we don't have control over where everything's going to go. And so this is one thing you have control over.
Yeah. The other thing that I found has been, for me, holding on to certain structures within your day that you did before has been key. So for me, one of the big structures that I had was when I'm not working, I always walk the dog 3 times a day.
Okay.
Now, on lockdown, officially, I can't go out of my property. So what I've been doing is I've still been doing the walk, but I've created the longest possible walk around my garden, as it happens, and just doing lap after lap after lap with the dog on a lead, so that way we're getting the exercise that I'm used to. And that, for me, has been absolutely magic. And interestingly enough, it's really been great for the kids too. because traditionally it was we do one of the walks together as a family, and the other two would be done separately by us. But the kids, when they're doing their online schooling and all that kind of stuff, they get a bit stir crazy with it too. So now we actually treat it. So I'll do probably 15, 20 laps of the garden. And but we do it in turns. So the kids do 2 laps each, and then I'll do the next lap or 2, and then we keep rotating it round. So they've actually, even though we're walking round and round in one big kind of circular lap over and over again, that structure from normal day life has proved magic in terms of just keeping us all kind of centered and healthy.
Seems to me I saw something very similar to what you're talking about from Catboy, Mr. Simon Smedley, on Instagram, where he said I'm not sure if I misread or if I'm imagining this, but I think he said he did 10 kilometers in his garden. I'm pretty sure it was some extraordinary number like that.
That's pretty much what I'm doing every day. It's great. I'm slightly worried that I'm about to create, the track like a baseball field.
Yeah.
The landlord will charge me for that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But it's proved really good. The dog's not too happy. He's totally lost as to why the hell am I going round and round in circles here. But it's all part of it.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got listing things out and doing that audit. We've got cleaning up and repositioning our rooms, moving them around. Do we have anything else on our DIY lockdown list?
Plans for the future. Now is the perfect time to look forward. So when this, hopefully, not necessarily over, but when things relax a bit, be ready to go. So therefore, if there were things that you were like, oh, I'd love to get that done, but it's going to take too long with the planning, plan it now. Google is your friend. You can research in all directions. You can spend as much time as you possibly need, making sure that your project, after this is all finished, is as good as it possibly could be. So the number of plans, obviously we're moving, so we are just like, I'm up to here with just the amount of research that it's taken. So the property that I'm moving to has been derelict for 9 years. So the amount of work that's involved with that, and actually we have incredible landlords who's put a really great budget together for the work that's required. But literally the planning process for that has been magic in terms of the amount of Google research that's been required, so that once we are ready to go, we can hit it hard. Man,
there we go. And you know what that is? That is
10 Minutes with Colin.
Surely that is longer. A long way than 10 minutes with Colin.
Well, I'm looking at the clock, how long we've been talking. We've been talking for about 38 minutes, and I'm figuring 20 of those was DIY and lockdown. But hey, that's all good.
Yes.
Maybe we need to change that intro to, just words of wisdom from Colin. Or, I'm sure your wife would love that one.
Yeah. Oh, man, it's classic. So we're talking about moving and move outs, and that's something that's kind of the next phase that we will get to. And interestingly enough, Rick at MacPack is a dear friend of mine, and we talk a lot about the moving industry and what people move. And there's kind of 2 schools here. There is either, I just can't face it, I'm going to get them to move everything, in which case he's like, you would not believe the cabinet sometimes that you look at, it looks this house that's utterly pristine, and then they open the cabinet door to work out, okay, how are we physically going to move this? And they realise that there is just 4 tons of rubbish and tat inside this pristine cabinet, So he has those kind of people he has to deal with. And he then says, look, I don't understand why people wouldn't have an almighty clear out before moving. And again, now is the perfect time for doing that. So looking through all of your stuff, Natalie, my wife, has given me the 2 projects, which is office and garage. Now, I've given her more than 2 projects, which is every single chest of drawers, because we have a lot in our place, and kids' baby clothes.
Oh no!
I never got this. So they're still in the kids' cupboards. But basically, she moves them down. So the bottom 2 or 3 are absolutely no use to anyone. And we can donate, and we regularly donate clothes, but not enough. So she's got that to do, and I'm going to be looking at trying to get my office, which has been a dumping ground for way too long, in the garage, which is the dumping ground, sorted out. So those are going to be my projects, I think, as a start point.
I think you've really nailed yet another thing that we could all be doing is, even if it's just starting, you're not planning to move, but you're staying where you are, just cleaning out one cupboard at a time. I mean, I am so guilty. We're so guilty. So first of all, we've lived in our villa for 20 years. We have never moved. My boys are now in their 20s. They've moved. They're in their careers. They've finishing school. They don't live in country. I opened up one of my, and both of their rooms are pretty much intact. Like they come back, they've taken some things with them, but there is a lot of their room is here. So when my boys come back to visit, they don't need to bring clothes because they still have clothes here. But even worse, Colin, you're going to love this one. I open up, so we've got built-in wardrobes. We're really lucky. I mean, we were in the era when they still did that here. So we got built-in wardrobes. I open up one of the middle wardrobes and I'm looking in, and there's no clothes in it, but there are 3 shelves 8 feet in height, filled with arts and crafts materials from when they were 5. My boys are in their 20s now.
Yes. Throwing that out, when you throw in that emotion, which is the main reason why we all hoard a bit, you throw in the emotion of memories.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot more difficult. I'm absolutely guilty. I've kept every card that the kids have got for every birthday, and I know which drawer that's in. And I don't care what happens, that's going nowhere, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And these things have memories, and it's difficult, but I think there's this balance, isn't there? Lots of people have that ideal for that clean, sleek family home that you see on Grand Designs and all the other places. And then you have the opposite extreme of that means so much to me that there's no way that's ever going.
Yeah.
Poles apart, aren't they?
Yes.
And all we're talking about here is when you're moving, it's a time to try and move from either extreme, I think, into kind of this midpoint, which is, okay, this needs to come forwards with me on the future life. And this stuff I can kind of leave with this house.
So I've got an added wrinkle to all this. When we moved here 20 years ago from Montreal, we lived Jean Talon Papineau area, if people are wondering where I lived in Montreal. So very close to where our prime minister's riding is in Canada now. And I always find that amazing because that is not a high rent district of Montreal in the least. It's, in fact, this summer when we drove down into that area, we were driving from the plateau, and then we drove into our old neighborhood, and we literally went underneath some train tracks. And when we came up, because we were now on the other side of the tracks where we used to live, we kind of went, are we in a different planet? Where are we? And it's like, lock the doors. So when we moved from Montreal, we brought pretty much our house with us. And so when I go into my kitchen drawers, there's stuff in there that I haven't used in 20 years. I'm not even sure why I brought it with me, but I've got Montreal in the kitchen as well and around the house. I need to get rid of that stuff.
See, when I came 15 years ago now, I think. And I came with 6 boxes.
Oh, man.
Which worked out really well, because if you imagine, I arrived here as a single, just under 30-year-old, I guess. And then that kind of life development was then wife and now kids. And that is where you kind of agglomerate, isn't it? That's where all of this stuff comes from. And I don't think, Rick's literally said, look, I'll just bring the entire fleet and we'll just do as many trips as we have to do.
There you go.
So moving is going to be quite something.
We do have to still do that show with Rick, just talking about stories of moving and what works and what doesn't work, and how I think and I say this purely from a selfish basis. So I want to have a chat with Rick from MacPack, and we can do it together maybe, because you've dealt with Rick for so long. So you could kind of introduce us and we could have this big conversation. But selfishly, why I want to have the chat, well, there's 2 reasons. One, I just think it would be entertaining to hear some of his stories that he could tell, and that's better than Netflix. But the other side of it is, as that person who at some point in my career here in the UAE is going to be using Rick's services at MacPac, inevitably I will be moving somewhere in the UAE in the next 20 years or home in the next 20 years to Canada. I'm going to need his services. And I just think it would be great to know going into it what I can do. And you've alluded to the first one in just clearing out the crap, but what else I can do, that nice little checklist of what I can do so that when Rick and his team get here, that it's as painless for them and for me, as opposed to now this whole sorting deal and other things. And I bet you he's got a whole bunch of little tips of things that I would never have thought of because they're so basic and so simple. But because they're so basic and so simple, I'm not thinking of them. So I'd love to have that chat.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be well up for it. He's always great value. He drops in probably every couple of weeks to WeWillFidIt Towers, and we have a great chat. He's an entertaining fellow who works really hard. That's a tough industry. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
His boys are spectacular. I genuinely can't recommend them highly enough.
Awesome. So, okay, you got to get us on the list. You got to get us interviewed, get us so we can have that chat. And we still have to have a chat with Dustin. We still need to have a chat with Dustin Chernowski over there at EnviroServe.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, we definitely do. In fact, his boys. See, there's one big problem that we've got at the moment, which is suppliers. Because everybody's shut down. It's literally a to get parts of things. We're managing so far, but Dustin, bless him, is doing great guns for us.
Well, that's because he's Western Canada, that boy. So he's got his head screwed on straight. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a big question I've got, Colin. Is with things like Ace closed down and temporarily closed. SpeedX. I don't know about my neighborhood, hardware stores because I haven't been out in the neighborhood looking. But I've been wondering where are people going like yourselves? Where are you getting supplies now?
If you imagine, we've been doing this since 2008. So we have an absolutely enormous network, and what we've always stated to our purchasing teams is, I don't want one supplier for things. I need multiples. So that if we have a problem in one direction, we can always jump in another. So the brief to them has been, make sure that the whole network, you're keeping up to speed with not only who's open, but who actually has what parts are available in different locations and different suppliers. So from that, actually, what we found is, for most items, they still have residual stock, even if new isn't coming in. So we're all right at the moment. We are holding a lot more stock than we would do normally, just to try and kind of cope with these things. But we know we are going to get caught out for the specialist items. So not the everyday, but the specialist items. And that's where it's going to get really difficult.
Well, let's hope that all of this blows over, so to speak, sooner than later, and that we keep our heads level, that we keep focused, and we carry on making things work. And this circles right back to our conversation about this nation. One thing that really highlights it, and you've seen this from the entire time you've been here, I've seen it in the time that I've been here. There's a lot of ingenuity. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of, we can make this happen, and we can work through adversity, whether that be temperature, whether that be geopolitical situations, in this case, whether this be a global pandemic. We've got innovation on our side, and we're going to make it work. So I think that filters down to the entire population, and what you guys are doing over at WeWillFidIt and Essential Maintenance is really a harbinger to how things are going to sort themselves out. And where there is a will, there is a way.
I couldn't agree more. It comes right from the top, doesn't it? From Sheikh Mohammed down here in the UAE, there's this can-do attitude that is contagious when you come to Dubai.
Yeah.
There isn't the thought of no, it can't be done is almost the opposite of what this whole place stands for. So even on a micro level, that's exactly where we sit as well. So how can we keep operating? How can we still help our customers? What do we have to do to make that happen? Is very much the perspective that we're having on a daily basis. In fact, that's always been the way, but even more so now. And it's just a question of rolling with it, roll with the punches, and we know that we'll get through it.
On that note, Colin, I'm going to wrap up our podcast. As always, what a pleasure to have this conversation. If you want to get in touch with us, potaholics@gmail.com. Follow us, Potaholics with a K, across all the socials. If you want to get in touch with Colin, that's Essential Maintenance Dubai, We Will Fix It Dubai. You can find them online as well. And Colin joins us, every week at this time or so. We have a conversation about DIY and more in the UAE. You've been listening to Potaholics and the We Will Fix It podcast.